The legacy of those veterans is still felt to this day. Though the RAF is now armed with modern technology, its spirit traces back to the courage of those young pilots of 1940. Edward's life was proof of this. He spent many years as a teacher in a village school. His youth, forged in the heart of dogfights, had made him strong. Yet in his later years he lived simply as a humble teacher. He taught mathematics and history, and sometimes shared fascinating stories about aircraft. The local people held him in deep respect. Especially on Victory Day or Veterans Day, the villagers would bring Edward to the center and welcome him with honor. And he would always repeat the same words. Heroism is not only made in the skies. Heroism is honest work every day, care for your family, and loyalty to your friends. He remained humble until the very end of his life. In his old age, some children could hardly imagine that he had once fought face-to-face with the enemy. But when they visited a museum and saw documents bearing his name, they were astonished. Edward passed away at the age of 92. The whole village gathered for his funeral. Representatives of the RAF came to pay tribute, and military aircraft flew overhead in his honor. As the sky thundered above, tears welled up in the eyes of those below. Though he was gone, the legacy he left behind was eternal. Among his former students were doctors, engineers, and soldiers, and whenever they faced hardship, they remembered Edward's words, "The true victory is peace." Today, Britain's air defense force is still considered one of the strongest in the world. But its greatest strength lies not only in modern technology, but in the spirit of past generations. The stories of veterans like Edward teach us this. A generation that does not understand the value of peace will lose its meaning, but a nation that honors it will never bow. And in the end, one question should remain in each of our hearts. Are we living lives worthy of the sacrifice of those who once defended today's peaceful skies? Edward's courage did not remain just a memory. His life story inspired many young soldiers in England. At RAF academies, the stories of veterans are still told as examples, and the accounts of pilots who survived the Battle of Britain serve as true motivation for new generations. One detail about Edward is well known. In his later years, he donated his pilot's uniform to the Imperial War Museum in London. That uniform is still on display today. Hundreds of tourists, school children, and even young cadets look at it and imagine the hardships those veterans endured. The legacy he left behind was not merely a uniform or medals. It was the image of bravery and humility, forever preserved in the memory of the people. The strength of today's RAF is also built on those lessons. Modern Britain's air defense force is equipped with Eurofighter Typhoons and fifth-generation F-35 Lightning II jets. But the most important thing is that within the soldiers who fly them lives the spirit of veterans like Edward. Every year on Veterans Day, when people lift their eyes to the sky, there is a moment of silence. As the roar of aircraft fills the air, the nation remembers its veterans. Thanks to them, England's skies remain clear, and its people live in peace. Edward Harper's name may not be carved into stone, but it lives in thousands of hearts. His heroism was not only the fate of one man, it was the spirit of an entire nation. And one wise thought remains. Air defense is not just metal and machines. It is people's faith, the power of unity, and hope for the future. It is thanks to that faith that England's skies are still clear today. The life of Edward Harper was the story of a simple village boy who rose into the skies to defend his nation, and later returned to the ground to become a teacher. His heroism was not in the speed of an aircraft, but in the courage of his heart. In his later years, he often repeated one phrase: "The true victory is not winning the war, but preserving peace." His students, children, and grandchildren never forgot those words. The young pilots flying in Britain's skies today follow in the footsteps of veterans like Edward. They have mastered every control of their aircraft, but more importantly, they have grown up understanding the value of peace. On the day of his funeral, 3 RAF planes flew overhead, performing the traditional missing man formation. The entire village fell silent. Tears streamed from the eyes of the people, not from grief, but from gratitude. For they knew Edward's life had not been in vain. He not only defended his country, but also guided future generations. Today, when we look up at the sky, we see not only aircraft, but also the spirit of the veterans who once flew them. And one question remains for us all. Are we living lives worthy of that generation who gave everything for a peaceful sky? This, then, is the true history of the Royal Air Force and the legacy of its veterans, a call to remember the past and protect the future. Friends, you've just heard the moving story of one such veteran. Now we have a request for you. If you want their courage to be remembered, subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends. From which city are you watching? Write it in the comments below. The Royal Air Force, founded in 1918, was the world's first independent air force. But its greatest test came in 1940. That period went down in history as the Battle of Britain. At the time, the German Luftwaffe had more than 2,500 aircraft. Britain, however, had fewer than 2,000 fighters, the Spitfire and the Hurricane. The balance of power was unequal. Yet Britain had one advantage: a radar system called Chain Home. This network made it possible to detect the enemy early and direct pilots into position. But technology alone could not bring victory. Victory depended on human courage. The average age of RAF pilots was barely 20. They were students, workers, and ordinary young men from villages. One of them was Edward Harper, a 19-year-old boy. His dream was to become an engineer. But when war broke out, he put his ambitions aside and volunteered for the Air Force. Edward never forgot the first time he sat in a Spitfire. His hands trembled, his heart pounded. But once in the sky, fear was left behind. He felt he was flying not just for his own life, but for mothers, children, and the future of England. In August 1940, he took part in his first air battle. Amid the swarms of German planes, Edward skillfully maneuvered his Spitfire and shot down a bomber. It was his first victory. Yet in that moment, he understood how brutal the war would be. Thanks to such battles, Britain did not fall. And at the heart of those battles were the fates of thousands of young men like Edward. Winston Churchill's famous words were dedicated to them. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. The freedom of millions depended on the sacrifice of the few. Edward fought in many missions. Each time he took off, he thought, "This one might be my last." But still, he kept flying. In 1945, his aircraft was damaged, and he was forced to parachute to the ground. He was injured, and after the war he could not continue as a pilot. Yet he did not give up. He returned to his village and became a teacher. In every lesson, he told children, freedom did not come easily. Thousands gave their lives for it. His words stayed in the memory of generations. There were thousands of stories like Edward's in the RAF. One of them was Margaret Holmes. At 21, she spent sleepless nights at a radar station, tracking enemy aircraft. By providing timely warnings, she helped prevent dozens of attacks. She was not on the battlefield, but she was one of the young heroes who defended her country. Another was James Collins, a gunner on a bomber. During one mission, their aircraft was hit, but James kept his gun firing to protect his crew until the very end. He did not survive, but his comrades made it home alive. There were thousands of such stories. Each one became part of the nation's heart. Edward's life continued after his retirement. Every September 15th, the anniversary of the Battle of Britain, he would pin on his medals, go to the memorial in London, and honor his fallen friends. The tears in his eyes, the heavy memories in his heart, never faded. His children and grandchildren often asked him, "Grandfather, was it frightening?" Edward would smile slightly and say, "Yes, it was frightening, but there is something stronger than fear, the feeling of defending your country. The peaceful skies we live under today exist thanks to the sacrifice and bravery of that generation." As Churchill said, "Never before in history did so few give so much for the freedom of so many." Among them was Edward Harper. Veterans like Edward Harper lived ordinary lives after the war, but their legacy remained forever in the history of Great Britain. In the post-war years, the RAF became one of the most powerful air forces in the world. Yet its foundation had been laid in those difficult days. The Battle of Britain was not only a victory of the military, but a victory of the entire nation. At that time, the people themselves became a united front. Everyone contributed in their own way. Volunteers put out fires in the streets. Women worked tirelessly in munitions factories. Children collected scrap metal. And in the skies, the young pilots became symbols of hope. Sometimes, while teaching, Edward would point through the classroom window at the blue sky and say to his pupils, "For this peaceful sky you see, thousands gave their lives." He never considered himself a hero. He would only say he had done his duty. But over time, generations came to value his courage. When his pupils grew up, they often wrote him letters saying, "You taught us the true price of freedom." The history of RAF veterans is not only about military victories, but also about humanity, resilience, and faith. At first glance, they were just young men in small planes. Yet thanks to them, an entire empire did not fall. In his old age, Edward took part in a veterans' parade in London. Hundreds of white-haired men, with medals on their chests, marched slowly across the square. The crowd around them applauded. At that moment, tears filled Edward's eyes. He knew that many of his comrades were no longer by his side, but their spirit was there in that parade. In one of his final words, he said, "We won the war, but the true victory is peace. When children laugh and play, when mothers live without fear, that is the real victory." These words seem to sum up his entire life's philosophy. The history of Britain's air defense force is one of the nation's greatest prides. But it is not a story of mere numbers and machines. It is a story woven from the lives of ordinary people like Edward. And today, as we remember their courage, we must understand one thing. Peaceful skies never come on their own. They are always the result of someone's bravery and sacrifice.